From having the worst record in baseball, to possums living in the walls and their stadium literally falling apart, this is how the Oakland A's became the worst franchise in all of sports. You see, things haven't always been this bad for the A's. In fact, since the team moved to Oakland in the late 60s, they've gone on to appear in 6 World Series and won 4 of them. The only problem with that being that the last time Oakland won was in '89. And the last time the A's made it to a World Series was during the early 90s. So the A's haven't touched World Series soil in more than 30 years. And that's not to say that the A's haven't done anything for the last 30 years. I mean, they've made the playoffs here and there, but nothing serious has come of it. They've had probably 3 good stints since the 90s, and yet the farthest they've made it is the ALCS. And they made it to the ALCS in 2006, not even during one of their streaks. That is like the singular outlier in this whole ordeal. In fact, the first good stint they had goes all the way back to the early 2000s. That's right, they were bad for 10 straight years. We don't talk about Oakland baseball in the 90s. Let's just jump to 2000, where it consisted of core arms in Barry Zito, Mark Mulder, and Tim Hudson. And these 3 alone assisted in Oakland winning 483 games in just 5 years. And they're the reason that the A's averaged 97 wins from 2000 to 2004. The pitching staff was phenomenal those seasons. I mean, sure, did they lose in the ALDS like 4 times in a row? Maybe they did that, but besides the point, alright? The reason this team had such a good stretch for so long, those 4 or 5 years, is because not only was their pitching phenomenal from 3 good guys, but they also had a little bit of help on the offensive side. And I'm talking, they had superstar batters with the likes of Jason Giambi, Miguel Tejada, Eric Chavez, and hell, even Johnny Damon was nice for the A's for a few years. Anyway, this core group of guys on the offensive side were an explosion of offense. Beautiful to watch day in and day out for years. And them, along with that crazy pitching staff that I named off earlier, were the reason that the A's went ahead and made it to the ALDS for 4 years. The problem with this A's team is that as good as they were never good enough. And if you've watched Moneyball, which I'm sure you have, it's a movie about the A's, it basically centers around this core group of guys falling apart and the end of an era. See, why did this era end? Because they could never get past, they could never make it to the ALCS. Unlike this weird 2016. Now, what makes this 2016 different? Well, for starters, a few guys from back in the day did stick around. And by a few, I really am only talking about Eric Chavez and Barry Zito. Other than that, this roster was completely flipped. There was some more talent on the field, like Nick Swisher, Joe Blanton, and a hell of a closer in Hudson Street. And let me not forget to mention the Nugenics legend himself, Frank Thomas. Yep, the DH guy that hits a bunch of home runs. You've seen him in those commercials. Nugenics keeps men over 40, feeling great, feeling fine, whatever. He was on this team. Maybe he was the reason they did so well. Nah. I'm looking at this team, and do they have as much talent as the teams from the early 2000s did? No, they didn't. But Billy Beane somehow worked his magic and got this team to sweep, I'm talking sweep, the Minnesota Twins in a 3-game series in the ALDS. They had finally gotten over that hump. Unfortunately, it wasn't with the same group of guys that struggled, but Barry Zito did see the ALCS, along with Eric Chavez. They made it. And after that 2006 run, nothing happened for the A's for 6 years. I'm talking 0 playoff appearances until 2012, where we meet our new core of guys. Now, I might be a little biased here since these are the teams that I grew up watching, but this is probably my favorite group of players that I'm going to be talking about in today's video. Now, this team from 2012 to 2014 had another stretch of playoff runs. I'm talking 2 LDSs and 1 wildcard appearance. Sure, was it less success than the early 2000s? Yes, but honestly, Oakland will take what they can get, considering the fact that they had missed the playoffs for more than half a decade at that point. So what did this team have exactly? Well, let me tell you. Now, this I can name way more players. I mean, I'm talking Brandon Moss, Josh Reddick, Coco Crisp, Billy Bean, Derek Norris, Stephen Vogt, Eric Sogard, Josh Donaldson, Yoenis Cespedes. Now, I did watch a lot of these guys get traded away in pretty stupid trades. And yes, I hated it. But honestly, watching these guys for that 3-year run, magical. Hell, I haven't even gotten to the pitching staff. My favorite A's pitcher that I've seen, that I've watched live, Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray, my favorite. Oh my god, this guy was awesome. Scott Kazmaier was nice. Jesse Chavez was good. Jeff Samardzija was pretty solid. Sean Doolittle, best closer in the game. Hell, he went on to have more success with other teams. Loved Sean Doolittle. Now, there was guys like John Lester, but I don't know, we don't talk about the John Lester trade. That was horrible. A 1-year rental to what? Losing the wild card? Talk about a big mistake. Doesn't matter. Why? Because just like in the early 2000s, after this team failed to make a playoff run, those guys needed a payday. What were the A's going to do? Yeah, not pay their players. That's kind of their whole thing. They don't pay their players. They don't fix their stadium. They don't care for their fans. That's why they're the worst team in baseball, all right? So just like the early 2000s, and how Moneyball showed, they want to save money. Now, this isn't anything Billy Beane can do. He's listening to his bosses, the owners, John Fisher, specifically. Yeah, John Fisher, the cheap billionaire that he is, doesn't want to spend money on the team. So after their core makes a run for 3 to 4 years and it hasn't gone anywhere, they decide we're not going to pay these players. We're going to trade them for future assets, and hopefully those assets become the next stars that we can use before we have to pay those guys, which is exactly what happened here. You see, after the A's made those runs in the early 2010s, they would be bad for about 3 years as they waited for those players that they got in trades to eventually develop and become stars of their own. Now, I'm getting to the last stint of good A's baseball. I'm talking from 2018 to 2020. Now, this team included the likes of Matt Olson, Marcus Semien, Matt Chapman, Chris Davis, Steven Piscotty, hell, even Jonathan LaCroix, but we won't count. Now, most of those guys that I named, they're stars in this league right now. What do they have in common? They're not playing for the A's. Yes, Marcus Semien's gone, Matt Olson's gone, Matt Chapman's gone. Those are more recent, but they're not playing for the A's, and they're out being stars somewhere else. Hell, even their pitchers are gone. I'm talking Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas. All these guys are super young. Chris Bassett, Kendall Graveman, all these stars for the A's, they're still young. They're just reaching their primes, and yet they're already off of Oakland, the team that had them when they were young. Why? Because again, this trend continues where these super young players get good, but they just don't find enough success to go anywhere. And it's getting worse and worse. You see, in the early 2000s, at least the team made the ALDS every year. And in the early 2010s, they made it twice. But this 3-year stint of playoff baseball included 2 wildcard appearances and only 1 ALDS. So even less success. Even though these prospects are getting good as planned, they're having less and less success, and the periods are becoming shorter and shorter. And the worst part about this for the franchise is that even the casual fans are beginning to pick up on this trend and get pissed off, rightfully so. Now, it doesn't help that the team is going through pretty bad press coverage era. I mean, you've seen all the headlines about how awful Oakland is, but honestly, that's only really happening right now because the A's are going through one of their dark eras, right, where they're losing a lot. And this happens all the time. I mean, last time it lasted 3 years, the time before that it was 6, and before that there was a 9-year stretch where they were pretty bad, right? And so we don't know how long this is going to last, except for the fact that it's happening right now. In fact, the A's have just come off a 60-win season, and it's not looking to get any better. That was probably the worst season of Oakland A's baseball last year that I've seen ever. And the A's haven't been that bad since 94 when the team only won 51 games. Why did they win 51 games? Couldn't tell you. I wasn't born in 94. Didn't care. But yes, the A's have started off the season 3-16, bad yet again. What is the solution? Let me tell you. New owner. All right. I mean, this guy is just waiting. John Fisher is just waiting for the team to move to Las Vegas. And then what? Is he going to, stop being a cheapskate and make this team good? I have no idea. Honestly, I want a new owner. An owner that will spend money on the team. Sure, we're a small market, but John Fisher's a billionaire, okay? So the least you can do is try to be competitive and not have the lowest payroll in baseball. That is not a flex. That that is not an accomplishment, except for the fact that that seems to be like the only thing John Fisher is trying to accomplish, having the lowest payroll in all of baseball, the lowest possible. And you can tell because the team is pretty bad. I gave up watching the A's after the Tampa Bay series. After the Tampa Bay series, I knew it had gotten bad. In fact, I'm pretty sure most A's fans knew even before that. Hell, opening day gave me the most false hope ever. After I saw that game, I'm like, okay, we're real contenders. Until we weren't. We've been blown out by the Cubs, blown out by the Mets, blown out by the Rays. I can tell you what's next. All I hope is that John Fisher gets that Dan Snyder, that old Clippers owner treatment. Get him kicked out of this league ASAP. All right. Anyway, catch y'all later. Much love. Deuces.